Welcome to the Spoiler Alert podcast. And today we have another episode of our October Halloween marathon. And today we'll be reviewing 1932's Freaks. Freaks is pretty famous for just like kind of in the like classic Hollywood era of like being a movie that actually casted real circus performers and sideshow performers. It's kind of well known for a handful of reasons. Some we'll get into later, but before we really get into it, I'd like to encourage everybody to hit the like button, subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, check out the Spotify. If you're listening on Spotify, check out the YouTube. And we're going to get started. Having never heard of the movie before,
I'd heard of it. It's just one of those I never got to see. So I didn't know much beyond. I think I knew it was banned in the UK, and then I'm trying to really just that it had circus freaks in it and was controversial, and I think that's pretty much it as far as my knowledge of it. So and you were telling me it got cut extensively, so that I know.
Yep, and we'll get into a little more explanation of why that came. I'll just put it this way: the Wikipedia page is almost more shocking than the film itself.
Is it?
In a way, when you get down to explaining what happened. What actually
like behind
happened.
The scenes and shit, or
because I suppose we can explain this portion at the time right now is it is only an hour runtime or so, just a little over like an hour 3, but it was originally supposed to be an hour 30, and it went through some major cuts, and a large portion of the cuts were around the final scenes, and I also think there's a couple in the middle that they may have skipped, but a large portion of the cuts came around like some gruesome scenes towards the end that are lost forever, unfortunately. Like, it's one of the sad realities of like early Hollywood movies is when they would get cut. It's not even like, a Star Wars thing where you can at least find some way to at least learn about what happened, or you know what I mean? Or
right, where they're
whatever, like it's literally lost forever.
Well, I mean, that happened for largely up until DVD, and then they started releasing, deleted scenes and whatnot, not for everything. There's still stuff that gets, has been lost, like Event Horizon, some of those scenes from like Alien 3. I think there's an entire website called like lostfootage.com that like kind of, especially for horror movies, focuses in on some of the stuff that's been cut. It is a shame. It does feel abrupt at the end. I mean, but like it wants to go full blown horror movie, but just kind of, becomes this 2-minute scene. So it's still disturbing and creepy, like, but
I know what you mean. So the film actually begins in this circus sideshow. It's actually like some point in the future relative to the main plot of the story. So we kind of have like a bookended type of deal here, where the movie starts with this showman explaining like this freak, and the camera doesn't see the freak initially in the first scene, and it's like she used to be a trapeze artist, and used to be a great beauty, and and this is what she looks like now, and you just kind of like see screams or whatever, or hear I guess they don't scream just yet, but like the next scene we get is like her on like one of the big swings in sometime in the past when she wasn't a freak. The main plot here is that Hans, who is a dwarf, he has a loving girlfriend named Frida, who's also a little person, but Hans immediately has the hots for this trapeze performer. And her name is Cleopatra. And I kind of do like that, like another character that comes into play is Hercules, who is actually who Cleopatra has the hots for, and they kind of, they're kind of a thing.
Right.
I do think it's sort of clever that they use I mean, these are names that could easily be used in a real sideshow, but they use like historically notable like beauties on both sides for like,
Oh,
Hercules and Cleopatra, you know what I mean?
hmm.
Just to show that kind of like objective beauty that everyone seems to worship.
Yeah.
I just think that's pretty clever. Cleopatra is like, kind of playing cute with Hans, and asks for money. And Frida sees right through it. And Frida's like, she's just using you. Like, I love you. She's using you. And all the relationships among the freaks are like very, relatable. Like, they're pretty relatable actually. Like,
Well,
and
that's what I was gonna
that's
say. There's very clearly a family unit kind of thing going on, I think. And
Mhm.
I was gonna say, I mean, like the movie like is pretty compassionate like about its characters, I think.
It doesn't
I mean, I
seem
know the
as
whole premise is controversial, but it's not really till the very end even that like I could, just because it's not, I mean, the movie isn't like pointing and laughing at any of them. So, I
right.
mean,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The heart of the story is definitely on the side of the circus freaks. Like, I don't know. It's kind of like, I guess, like an underdog story, um,
yeah, yeah.
of some type. Like it uses real performers. So there are like people with like different, you know, uh, like, I guess, like, well, one of the things I should have mentioned is in the first scene is they brought up is the main showman showing off what was in the box. The freak in the box was explained the code of the freaks, which is, quote, to offend one, and you offend them all.
Oh,
So, like you were saying with the community aspect and the family aspect, is like, it is like they are what they have, you know what I mean? Like,
mm,
no outsider wants to like hang out with them. There's these people walking through the woods that sees the freaks playing in the woods in the daytime, and they're all weirded out, and they even have to just like work around times to go play with, and outside, and
mm,
just be like real people. It's all just because of how they were born. So it's
right.
not really fair.
And then even just like the way they're presented feels like really kind of just matter of fact. Like it doesn't really play up the deformities. They're just presented as is, So
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I don't. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I mean, because I knew it was controversial, so I was kind of like looking for where or why. I guess I mean, you know, I'm not sure I understand entirely, but I mean,
I think it ended up being controversial mainly just because of the gruesomeness. I could be mistaken, but I don't think a lot of people with, abnormalities or whatever really disliked the film that I've read up on.
yeah, I guess they're
It's
still being
possible.
paid kind of like in a freak show to perform on, but those are still like I think even going on at the time of the making of this movie. So I don't see
Right, like
why.
they were real performers. They didn't
Yeah,
it didn't seem exploitative to me. Like, and it showed them like behaving like normally. Like, they go through probably at least five different like relationships that blossom, where conjoined twins each have different
oh yeah,
boyfriends, and like one proposes or whatever, and one's like, oh, I might propose too. um and then like, we'll be seeing each other around.
it was like Viola and something else. I think but I only remember the guy who's stuttering. I forget his name, but I didn't know the other was gonna get
Well,
hitched.
there's two different clowns. There's one that
Well, there's
stutters.
Frozo who ends up with Venus, right? And
Yeah,
then
Frozo and Venus are kind of like the two, I mean, they're performers. They're like, one's a clown, and then one, I forgot what Venus does. Is Venus a baton twirler?
That's the other thing I missed. I
I
don't know
forgot.
exactly. But I
Yeah.
mean, she's normal. That much is good. So she's kind of like, like the woman that's the trapeze artist. So we don't really
Right.
get, actually, there aren't that many normal people, are there? I mean, I guess there's Frozo, and yeah, right. And then Hercules, Cleopatra, and Venus are normal, and then everyone else isn't. So,
And Frozo and Venus are pretty like always like very like nice to like this other performers, and so they're sympathetic characters pretty much from the jump. Like one thing that's kind of funny is like Frida vents to Venus about Hans, and just like, it's just like one of those girl talk scenes, or like those like girl talk things when someone's talking about someone's boyfriend or whatever.
oh yeah,
And it
well,
just seems very like you could copy and paste it and put it in a like romantic comedy or whatever today. You
right.
know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
because Venus had just broken up with Hercules, and then Frida is going through this thing with Han. So it's like, yeah, I mean,
yeah,
like,
because Hercules basically left Venus for Cleopatra.
oh yeah, right. And then
Yeah.
so
So it's like a weird, Cleopatra's really fucking with both Venus and Frida.
right. Yeah, they have that in common.
And then like we get some scenes with Frozo and Venus flirting, that those are kind of clever. Like Frozo's posing in a bath, but like so we think that he's like naked and she's looking at him, but like it's really just like this weird like wagon or some type of deal.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
yeah, I don't know. It was just a clever scene. And then we just really go into like some more like establishing how the performers have normal lives, like otherwise normal lives. Like the bearded lady has a baby with the human skeleton, and everyone's around, and kind
yeah.
of
Again, the
like,
communal thing where everybody rushes to go see the new baby, and so yeah.
yeah, it's very sweet that way. And like as like the community goes on, we've been explaining, rumors of Cleopatra kind of being like untrue towards Hans are getting around, because Hans had just come into a lot of money from inheritance. So that's why he was able to pay Cleopatra
Yeah,
some money and whatnot here and there. We're introduced to the human torso, who doesn't have a lot of speaking roles, but he's there towards the end, and he's kind of cool. It's kind of cool because, like, I mean, he doesn't have any legs or arms, but he can
right.
still light up a cigarette and roll it with just his mouth. So it's just a cool example of how like humans can be capable even if they have obstacles.
Yeah, I suppose that's another thing. I mean, again, where it's much more like, I mean, well, I don't even want to say progressive, but just like sympathetic than. So again, where the controversy comes in, I don't understand if it was controversial at the time. I mean, I know, like you said, all the stuff that got cut, but then it was banned for a really long time. Is the other thing. So I don't understand that part of it.
Yeah, I think it might have been the stuff that got cut, and I think seeing the real performers just made a lot of people like upset, like just upset or what, or like didn't put him at ease, or you know what I mean, like we like weirded him out, like. But I mean, it seemed honest, and maybe I didn't do enough research if I missed this, but I didn't find anything about like any of the performers being upset in in retrospect. You know what I mean? I think they do a pretty damn good job, just playing them honestly. You know what I mean? Explain a little further that Frozo is nice to everyone basically, and Venus likes that because he's not like Hercules, and because Hercules punched he just like Hercules like decked a
Oh,
I forgot the thing, like
yeah,
the half woman, half
yeah,
man
right.
was like, I think, checking out Hercules or something, and he walked over and punched them.
Yeah,
And
like I'm going to give you something to look at, and
it was just
Cleopatra laughs her ass off.
But yeah, so he's just an asshole, and Cleopatra's an asshole,
Right.
and that's about that's pretty much
I mean, is
it.
that our first tell that Cleopatra's well, no, I think it's when she starts asking for money, we kind of see where that's going to go. But definitively, once I think she starts cackling her ass off at that, we kind of get the sense that she sucks. I mean,
Yeah.
like,
Yep.
so
And they basically like embody everyone that would, I mean, they're in the circus too, but they kind of embody everyone, the opposite of the freaks, basically.
right.
Frida confronts Hans one more time and tells him that she thinks that Cleopatra's lying. And that's when they break up. There's a scene in one of the wagons where Cleopatra is showing off the jewelry that she bought with Hans's money to Hercules, and Frida comes in and confronts her. I suppose like Frida kind of loses that argument, but she's basically venting
and then Frida lets slip that Hans has this big fortune. Short version, Frida lets slip that Hans has come into a great deal of money. And Cleopatra definitely raises an eyebrow at that and then starts to scheme with Hercules as soon as Frida leaves, quite defeated. She tries to appeal to Cleopatra's humanity, but she doesn't have any really. And so,
And then very soon after, like you kind of see Cleo and Hercules plotting to kill Hans. And then we cut ahead to the wedding feast. So Hans and Cleopatra have been married. So like, I think this is some of the stuff that may have been chopped up too. Like we might have actually seen a wedding or maybe a little more to it. One of the first scenes in the wedding scene that we get is Cleo poisoning Hans's drink. She keeps egging him on to drink more and more, which we hear later on that Frida noticed that like Hans doesn't drink that much, but she kept making him drink.
Right.
Both Hercules and Cleopatra are very drunk at this point, so they make out without, they mistakenly make out, which, is not good cover for
right.
for that type of what they're trying to achieve is not good cover.
Well, and the whole time Cleopatra is letting slip a lot of these kind of obvious insults at, the freaks and Hans and, so, but yeah, ultimately culminating in that kiss, which just gives pretty much everything away to Hans. He's very devastated.
And really Hans is the only one that notices, and the rest of the freaks are kind of partying and drinking. And that's when
Frida had walked out long before because she,
yeah, for sure. And then everyone else is doing their like traditional like loving cup where they have like a big cup of wine or whatever they were drinking. And
this is the other thing I'd known from the movie, but I'd forgotten about the Google Gobble.
This is like the most famous scene of the movie where they chant one of us, Google Gobble, Google Gobble, one of us. So that's like their initiation into the freaks, basically. And like, you'll be a part of our community. We'll treat you like one of our own, as they do with each other.
Which is nice that Cleopatra absolutely hates. So then, she takes the goblet or whatever, splashes it.
But yeah, she throws the wine back at him, and splashes everybody and calls them freaks. And yeah, it's just it's a party killer, and like everyone leaves but Hans and Hercules and Cleo. And even after that point, like Hans is just like fucking like depressed as shit. But even then they put him on her shoulders and dance around.
Oh yeah, right.
Humiliating.
A horse ride or something. I don't. Yeah.
Definitely not a great wedding for Hans.
You can see him. He's like this on her shoulders. Like just it's just But God, So that's nice. But then after that, they know they fucked up. If they want that money, so they've at least. I mean, well, she at least needs to stick around long enough to keep poisoning him.
Exactly. So they kind of do a fake apology here,
which he's not buying. Which I liked, because after such a blatant display, I mean, I don't think you'd ever, But sometimes movies are like that, where like the character is a total idiot, They're like, oh, okay, if you're really sorry,
if you're really sorry. And Hans passes out in the bed, there was like a couple freaks like looking through the windows and they see it happen. They managed to get a doctor in there though, and the doctor says that Hans was poisoned. And then at this point, like Venus, because like word gets around, right? So Venus tells Hercules, like, we know you're trying to poison him and like kill him for his money. So now that Hercules knows, that Venus knows, that comes into play later. Cleo is still poisoning Hans by poisoning his medicine, but Hans like spits it out in a handkerchief because he's suspicious of her. Like he's smart enough to know. As soon as she leaves, Hans and like some of the other freaks like start plotting, and we don't really see exactly what they're plotting.
Well, I think they said, it happens tonight, which means Hans must have already been in contact with them. So I was keeping an eye out for places where there might have been a cut.
Well, like you said, it happens tonight, and this night's a lightning storm night, and it's, the wagons are moving. They're moving from traveling circus. They're moving from just to their next location.
Right.
Frida tells Frozzo what's going on, so that gets Frozzo suspicious of Hercules, and then this is intercut with a scene where Cleopatra is again trying to poison Hans, but some of the freaks are kind of around, so she was trying to do it sneakily, but
she ordered them all out, but yeah, she's but they refused to leave, so she's like, well, I still gotta poison them. So she just, like you said, tries to sneak it in.
But they all know what's up, so Hans looks directly at her when she does it, and then like the jig is up.
Well, he sits up, straight, like I'm okay now, so that's the first sign. And then she looks around and they start to pull knives, and I think like a Luger or something. I'm not sure, but and then Hans says, hand over that bottle, the little black bottle or whatever, and so yeah, and then he says, you've been poisoning me this whole time.
Like we said, like that scene is intercut with another scene where Hercules hops out of his wagon, goes in to Venus's wagon, and like kicks down the door because he wants to kill Venus, because Venus knows their plot. So Hercules is bashing in the door, and then Frozzo comes to the rescue and starts fighting with Hercules, and Frozzo's outmatched. Like Hercules is literally like a strong man in a circus. But he's leaving it all out there. He's giving it everything he's got. And then the wagon, I believe both wagons end up tipping. At least two wagons end up colliding and tipping over. And that's how Cleo gets out of her wagon. She starts running away into the woods. Hercules is like down in the mud with Frozzo, like strangling him. And then one of the little people, like another like little person in the show, throws a switchblade. It looks like right in the ribs, gets Hercules like right in the ribs, right, like maybe like right in the lungs.
And collapses face down in the mud, and
and he's just kind of like backing away from the mud, and you see like the human torso with a knife in his mouth,
crawling under the carriage, I think, right?
And they're all just like crawling under the carriage, and it's like a very like spooky scene. And that and then we just kind of like cut away from that scene, and I'll explain a little bit of what happened in the uncut version there. All right. Then we get a shot of Cleo running through the woods. She looks back, and they're like making their way towards her too, and then she screams.
Yeah, the guy without his lower half is like, that's another kind of disturbing image, because he has to run around on his hands. But it looks really, really scary. It looks pretty damn scary, like in the lightning, Yeah, right. Yeah. So
and then she screams once more, and then we get a cut back to the present day with the original, like the bookend, the beginning and the end, with that showman explaining the freak in the box, and then the audience sees what's in the box. It's Cleo's been
lammed, and
right. Cleo's been turned into a freak. She's like a bird, like it's like she's squawking, and it's it's pretty
Well, yeah, because I
disturbing.
don't know if they slash her throat or something. Her mouth is
Yeah,
all,
there's
yeah. So.
that's another thing that's
Actually, okay,
probably
so
cut
maybe
out
that's
is
why it's a bit controversial. Okay, that
yeah.
image might, yeah. So
There's like I think they had actually filmed the process of them doing some of that stuff.
delimbing
So
her, that might
yeah,
do it.
mutilating her basically.
Okay.
And they had cut that down. So that's like another thing I'll leave for a surprise at the very,
Okay.
very end here. And then there's one more scene which I know wasn't like that one, the quality on that looks worse, like there's an overexposure because that wasn't always the end of the movie. It was one of the only cut pieces of film that was restored. Frida, Frozo, and Venus go to visit him. And then Frida starts comforting Hans, and then Frozo and Venus, who appear to be together at this point, walk out, and it's kind of the happy ending.
Happy ending.
But I don't think that one was always attached to the back end. I think that was cut at some point, so that's why the quality difference is pretty stark between those two. But now, just to explain some of the stuff that was cut, or at least, we'll never know how gruesome and detailed they were in this, but this is an explanation of what actually happened to Hercules and Cleo. In the original version, Cleopatra had an eye gouged out, which you can
I think she was like,
yeah. She had an eye gouged out, her tongue severed, so that's why she can only squawk.
Okay.
Her hands were melted together so as to like make feathers, like wings.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah.
And then her legs were amputated and she was permanently tarred and feathered. As for Hercules was castrated.
Jesus fucking Christ. Wow. Well, how do you even like? I don't know how you implicate that. Even I mean, without. Well,
I'm telling you, the Wikipedia is almost crazier than the movie itself. But that's basically the movie. Like, I don't know. I really enjoyed it. It's kind of got this like cult following.
Well, wait, does Hercules survive or does he die or like?
I think he becomes. It just says they turn him into a castrato, so that means someone who's castrated.
That means he must have lived. So he has to live dickless for the rest of his life.
I think he lived. Yeah.
So the strong man isn't much of a man now. Okay, that's poetic. That's
yeah. So like that could be some of the negative thing is like showing like the freaks as being so vengeful. But I mean, it's a movie too. Like, I mean, I don't know.
Well,
like,
what I would say, because I thought about that. I was like, I mean, I think they're made monstrous, right? I mean, at the end, like it's, the worst is brought out of them because they're treated as monsters, by like actual kind of monstrous people, the whole film. And then, I mean, and obviously, I mean, she's trying to kill Hans. They're sort of justified, though cutting people's dicks off is a little extreme, but I mean, but we don't see any of that in the actual film itself. So, I mean, as it is, well, actually, I guess she's still tarred and feathered. That's pretty hardcore too. Okay. Yeah. I mean, might have been, but she was trying to kill him and she's technically alive. So it's like, I mean,
kind of in like movie universes and in fiction universes, like that kind of thing's like acceptable and still being like they're still the heroes, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because they let her live. That was really not
because they let her live. But like, you know what I mean? Like Kill Bill, like she kills hundreds of people,
Maybe Batman should do that. He can still maintain his no kill policy, but he can like delimb people and turn them into duck things, and that would freak everybody out. They're
right. Like I don't know. Like I suppose like that would be the main. If people were like worried about how the freaks were represented, this might. Like the vengeful portion might be the only part, but the idea is they're a family, and I think it works in like movie world, basically. Not in the real world. If it happened in the real world, maybe it'd be a little more fucked up. But like in movie world, it works.
Sure.
And it's just important to like reiterate that the code of the freaks is offend one, you offend them all. And they
Right. I mean,
made
yeah,
and
look,
they
don't fuck with the
made
family,
don't
right?
fuck with the family, man. Don't fuck with it. And at the end, it's kind of poetic because they make basically the assholes
Mm.
of the circus, like they make them into freaks because like they're like the freaks, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Well,
they,
yeah, they're as ugly as they always were, like they were the
yes.
real monsters,
Now,
Um,
right now they're as ugly on the outside as they were on the inside. Well put. That's kind of what that was exactly what I was trying to say.
okay. Well, I guess I mean, that's freaks.
I mean, it's a very short film. Like I guess its impact on society is it's a kind of cult classic. Lots of people watch it. Like lots of people like it's kind of like a rewatchable old flick. Good for Halloween. Good for I don't know. It's like a good group watch movie too, which it probably isn't true of all. If you define this as horror, I'd call it technically a horror movie. It's about as scary as it gets in 1932.
Yeah, but especially with the now they're think of the woman at the end. Yeah, it's probably a horror movie.
Yeah,
But
it
but
would
there's
just
really
be
only like what 3 minutes of actual horrific imagery. I mean, out of the whole hour, it's still very brief. Okay, yeah, that was the other thing I was going to say. It keeps kind of falling in with a lot of horror movies we're doing, where it's like it'll spend a long period of time building up to an especially horrific, like
yeah.
audition. So that seems to be another trend.
Audition, and then even though Martyrs had quite a bit of scary scenes through the middle, like it definitely peaks. So yeah, like a lot of these movies just like know when to peak with their horror. So that's smart. My recommendations would be a movie like King Kong. It's not a horror movie, but it's got that kind of same theme where it's like there's an outsider, or misunderstood type of person, or in King Kong's case, creature. And like love dynamics along with that. And
The
then
Frankenstein.
and yep, that was the other
Oh,
one.
okay, sorry.
And then my other great minds think alike. My other recommendation would be either Frankenstein or specifically the one I own, or I think the better one is actually like The Bride of Frankenstein, which is even more like heartbreaking and like again similar things where the main character is like some sort of like isn't made to feel human by others, and doesn't feel like they have a place, and then there's the love tragedy dynamic within that.
Yeah,
And then what are some of your recommendations to go to?
Dracula would have been done a year before by Todd Browning, and then that's really all I know that he's done. But let's see, uh, American Horror Story, the 4th season, I think it was, is Freak Show. I haven't watched it, but it's another one. I think they use real freaks in that, and like well, because it even says right here, don't say it, hiss it. But it was a 1970s like made for TV horror movie. But it does have, yeah, what's 1973. But it is kind of like, I saw it. I mean, it is kind of disturbing. It has like again, it has real I think freak show performers in there. So and those scenes are actually, yeah, I mean, kind of well, much like the final scene at the end of this one. I mean, I think that now that I think about it, might have been the inspiration.
And then I suppose one other thing I would mention that I was kind of reading of, like, based on the time that this film was made, it's made during the Great Depression. So some of it might have to do like with the very poor and the very rich or whatever. Like that was just like an idea, but really it's
And then
for
like Hans is rich at the end though, so I'm trying to think what that would.
right. I suppose like socially rich, I should say. You know
Oh,
what I mean? Where it's
okay.
like, there's the outcasts that feel like, the country's left them behind or whatever. And then like very few have stayed at least relatively wealthy. And even a lot of the very wealthy people lost a bunch of money too.
Well, yeah, because
So
again, well, yeah, there's that family, everybody's trying to take care of each other, and help each other out. And then you have these people that, are trying to destroy that, at the core. I mean, so,
mhm,
um,
exactly.
yeah,
So I mean, there's just a general like idea that like, yeah, it's not necessarily like what the movie's about, like totally is that specific, you know,
well, yeah, I mean, you could probably
way of
apply it to
thinking,
anything.
but like, it is applicable. And, if you think about when it was made. So that was Todd Browning's Freaks. What score out of 5 are you going to give the film, Dakota?
I'm thinking for the time period, 4.5,
I was thinking exactly 4.5 too, honestly, depending on how well the more gruesome violence were to be filmed, it could have gone as high as 5, but it's got its limitations, so it's not going to be perfect for me, but I enjoyed it quite a bit.
No, I did too. And it'll just be one of those things that, people sit around and think about what might have been it, which maybe makes it all the more, especially now. Like I'm like, man, how would you film a dude being castrated without actually show? I mean, if they did, who knows, right? So it'll be a mystery, and that keeps you thinking about it.
And again, it's a good movie to watch with a group of film nuts too. Like during like the Halloween season, like it's good to, because it's a communal movie, right? And
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
if
Yeah.
you watch it with a community of
With a bunch of film freaks,
a bunch of film freaks or a bunch of horror nuts, like what, you can kind of feel like you're right in the movie with them. Like it's just, and that's, I think, part of the cult aesthetic there.
Right. Well,
But it was great talking about this movie, Dakota, and we'll kick it off by just gooble gobble, gooble gobble,
Google gobble,
gooble gobble.
Yeah.